Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we peel back the skin of reality, to expose the hidden architecture of influence for stories they said were too real to tell.
And for years, we've all been told the scariest stories are about the things you can see.
Right. The ghosts, the villains, the direct attacks.
But what if the real control, the real mechanism, operates below the level of your vision, your hearing, even your conscious thought?
It's the ultimate bait and switch, isn't it?
It is. We operate, and the sources on this are really clear, under this myth of the sovereign individual.
The idea that you're in total control.
Exactly. That every anxiety spike, every time you decide to buy something, every single urge to keep scrolling on your phone is a purely rational, self-generated thought.
But it's not.
The deeper you go into the data, the more it becomes just so evident that our emotions, our perception of space, even our basic physiological stability are constantly being primed, pulled by these invisible waveformed forces.
I mean, let's just be authentic for a second, because we all feel it. We do.
We absolutely do.
So what if that pervasive feeling of just ambient creeping anxiety, the one that makes you feel like you need to check your phone right now, or that specific unease you feel walking into certain buildings, what if it isn't paranoia?
What if it's a physiological reaction to something you literally cannot hear?
Yes. It's not existential dread, it's physics. Okay, let's unpack this, because the rabbit hole really starts with the realization that your body is constantly being tuned, and often without your permission.
Today, we are deep diving into what we're calling the wave-formed cartography.
Wave-formed cartography, I like that.
It's this entire architecture of influence, and it's comprised of frequencies, sound, and non-sound that exist both above and below our conscious sensory threshold.
So all the stuff we can't normally detect.
And this architecture is designed to shape, to manage, and sometimes to rupture the mass social body. We're really focusing on the nexus of sound, infrasound, ultrasonics, subliminals, and how they induce this psychological split in reality.
Our mission in this deep dive is to shortcut you past the noise in the noise floor. We're pulling verifiable data, straight from military applications, consumer behavior studies, medical research, academic physics, all of it.
To lay bare the scientific basis for the stories they said were too real to tell.
And we're going to start at the low end of the spectrum. The stuff that makes people convinced their basement is haunted. We're going to show you how science explains the specter of fear.
Let's begin with infrasound. This is the deep, dark end of the auditory spectrum. Officially, it's defined as frequencies below 20 hertz.
Which is the normal, accepted low limit of human hearing.
Right, it is. But here's a critical distinction the source material really emphasizes. Even professionals often mistakenly equate infrasound with being inaudible.
So they think you just can't hear it at all.
And that's factually untrue.
Right. It's not that we can't detect it, it's that we perceive it in a totally different way, a much more physical way.
Exactly. The research is clear that once you drop below about 10 hertz, the human ear stops perceiving a continuous tonal sound.
So it's not a hum anymore.
No. Instead, you start perceiving the distinct single cycles of the sound wave.
Whoa! So you can feel each individual pulse of sound.
And this perception is not a gentle hum. It is accompanied by a very specific and profoundly uncomfortable sensation of pressure at the eardrums and in the chest.
So it's less like hearing a low note and more like a physical force just pushing against your organs.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's this non-passive, almost aggressive physical perception. And that's why the historical discovery of its effects is so foundational to all of this.
You're talking about the 1957 incident, right?
Let's talk about 1957. The French scientist Vladimir Gavreau and his research team were working in this massive, thick-walled concrete building.
So a very solid, isolated place.
Right. And over a period of weeks, the whole team started experiencing these intense, deeply unpleasant, and periodic bouts of extreme nausea.
All at the same time.
It would just hit them. They were suddenly incapable of work, gripping their stomachs, feeling this powerful internal distress.
Okay, that sounds like a sudden onset of food poisoning that was somehow contagious across the entire lab.
That was the initial speculation. It had to be a pathogen, right? Or maybe some kind of toxic gas leak.
Of course. You check the vents, you check for chemicals.
They brought in medical teams, they checked the air quality, they searched for any kind of noxious fumes leaking into the facility, and they found nothing.
So it wasn't a toxin.
They realized the symptoms weren't chemical, they were acoustic. They traced the source back to a seemingly innocuous piece of equipment, a newly installed, loosely poised, low-speed motor.
Just a motor.
Just a motor that was developing nauseating vibrations. They did the math and calculated the frequency was in the low infrasonic range.
So they weren't catching a virus. Their entire digestive system was literally vibrating in sympathy with an industrial frequency.
Right. That's terrifying because it means the external environment has the keys to your internal organ function.
And Gavreau took this further, didn't he? He didn't just stop there.
No, he built a large, high-powered infrasonic whistle, basically a sonic cannon. And when he tested it outside, the noise was so powerful it physically shook the walls of nearby buildings.
And what did it do to the people?
It caused intense pain and nausea in the testing team, even from a great distance. It demonstrated a clear, repeatable mechanism for physically attacking the body using sound you couldn't consciously perceive.
That realization is the perfect bridge to the creepy stuff.
Absolutely.
Because once you accept that these unheard frequencies can make you profoundly physically ill, it is a tiny, tiny conceptual jump to linking infrasound to supposed ghost sightings, poltergeists.
The classic feeling of being watched. This is where the 17 hertz and 19 hertz link comes in.
That's so-called ghost frequency.
A psychologist, Richard Wiseman, has done extensive work suggesting that these strange, non-specific sensations people attribute to ghosts may actually be caused by very specific, very common infrasonic vibrations.
Generated by what? Like everyday things.
Exactly. Ventilation fans, traffic, even just natural wind effects on a building.
The narrative that really crystallized this whole idea was the case of Vic Tandy.
A fantastic example. He was an experimental officer and lecturer at Coventry University, and he was working alone late one night.
In a laboratory that everyone knew had a reputation for being heavily haunted, of course.
And he felt that classic wave of anxiety. The air felt heavy, and he had the distinct feeling of being watched by someone or something.
The classic haunting setup.
And then came the visual artifact. Out of the corner of his eye, he detected a gray blob, a classic apparition.
But when he looked at it,
The moment he turned to face it directly, it vanished. But Tandy, being a scientist, he didn't just run out screaming. He looked for a physical cause for his terror.
and he found one.
He and his colleague, Dr. Tony Lawrence, researched the environment and published a paper that is now foundational to this field. They suggested a 19 hertz signal was the culprit.
And the source.
They found a new, quiet ventilator fan nearby. And that frequency, 19 hertz, is incredibly important because it's very, very close to the natural resonant frequency of the human eyeball.
Wait, like a wine glass vibrating when a specific note is played?
Exactly like that. If your eyeball is constantly being shaken by a 19 hertz vibration, it causes optical illusions, pseudo-hallucinations.
So this slight shaking creates those fleeting gray apparitions or blurring in your peripheral vision.
Which is then interpreted by a stressed, anxious brain as a ghost or a spirit. The environment literally hacks your sensory input.
So instead of a restless spirit, it was just a restless ventilation fan.
That takes the romance out of the paranormal, sure, but it gives us incredible insight into the architecture of fear.
And this isn't just theory either. We have actual studies proving the emotional coding capabilities of these unheard frequencies.
We do. One controlled study secretly incorporated a 17 hertz near-infrasonic tone into concert music during a live performance.
So the audience had no idea.
No idea. The music itself was harmless, but that 17 hertz tone was constant, just under the surface.
And the results were stark.
Yeah.
And a little disturbing.
A significant percentage of respondents, 22%, reported feelings of intense sorrow, nervous revulsion, deep unease, or just getting chills down their spine.
Without being able to identify a source for the feeling. They were aware of the music, but their emotions were being dictated by this subaudible tone.
As Professor Wiseman summarized, these findings robustly support the idea that this level of sound can cause people to have powerful negative emotional and physical sensations that they then attribute to an external supernatural cause. The fear is real.
The cause is just boring physics.
Exactly.
That concept, that environmental factors we can't hear are influencing our mood, that leads us straight to a global phenomenon that millions of people experience chronically. The hum.
The hum is not a one-off ghost story. It's a persistent, low-frequency sound, often described as a low, continuous drone.
Like an idling diesel engine far away.
That's the most common description. And it's incredibly elusive because it's not heard by everyone, and its frequencies are often difficult to measure with standard equipment.
Which leads to a lot of sufferers being dismissed, right?
Yeah.
As having psychosomatic symptoms.
Completely dismissed. But the source material documents this phenomenon globally, dating back to the 1970s. Bristol, England, Taos, New Mexico, Auckland, New Zealand. We are talking about decades of sustained, localized acoustic torture.
And the quintessential modern case is the Windsor hum in Ontario.
Starting around 2010, residents near the Detroit River began reporting this maddening, droning vibration. It got loud enough to disrupt sleep, cause sustained irritation.
It prompted thousands of reports to Canadian officials. I think I read there were 22,000 reports on a single evening in 2012.
It was a massive event, and it was eventually estimated that this relentless noise was emanating from Zug Island, a heavily industrialized section of River Rouge in Detroit.
And the Canadian officials asked for U.S. cooperation to get onto the island and measure the source, but they were repeatedly stonewalled,
That refusal is frankly highly suggestive.
to say the least.
And while correlation isn't causation, the noise, which was widely described as correlating with blast furnace operations and massive machinery, finally, definitively, went away in April 2020.
When did it stop?
The cessation happened the moment the blast furnaces on Zug Island were idled. A clear industrial source, an immense amount of chronic suffering, and a complete lack of accountability while it was active.
Which brings us to the critical section, the physiological danger of all this.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about irritation anymore. We're talking about genuine health threats that exist outside our current regulatory frameworks.
The science has mapped this quite precisely. Different frequency ranges target different systems within the body. It effectively turns your body into a customized resonance chamber.
Can you break down the specific body hacking frequencies for us?
Certainly, the 2 to 4 hertz range is documented to specifically affect the cardiovascular system.
How so?
Chronic exposure causes measurable changes in blood pressure and heart rate variability. Even lower, the 5 to 7 hertz range, often generated by heavy trucks or industrial ventilation, causes resonance of the chest wall.
And that can induce difficulty breathing.
And discomfort. Your body literally starts vibrating in sympathy with the environment around it.
That is horrifying. The idea that your internal environment is being hijacked by external sources.
Yeah.
And the danger is amplified because the intensity, the decibels.
Exactly. The source material argues forcefully that environmental regulations need to be urgently reconsidered. Research has found that chronic exposure to infrasound at levels higher than 90 decibels can interfere with cardiac function.
And put 90 decibels in perspective for us.
If you roll down your car window while driving at about 60 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour, you are exposing yourself to levels as high as 125 decibels.
So just driving on the highway is subjecting people to potentially cardiac disrupting frequencies.
It is. The increased generation of man-made infrasound from massive infrastructure, traffic, industrial installations, even poorly regulated ventilation systems in your apartment building, it's a historically unanticipated public safety concern.
And this chronic exposure, even at lower levels, is just constantly linked to headaches, sleep disorders, concentration deficits, and dramatic mood changes.
We're living in a low-frequency pressure cooker, and it's stressing our entire nervous system.
Okay, so if part one was about that deep, low-frequency pressure of infrasound, we're now moving up the frequency ladder to the area of conscious and unconscious influence, the subtle nudges of subliminal psychology.
Right at the boundary of awareness or just below it?
Subliminal messages are, at their core, words or sounds presented below the threshold of conscious detection. They had this massive popularity in the late 20th and early 21st century.
Especially among young populations seeking self-improvement. Everything from trying to alter their physical appearance to getting better grades or attracting materialistic goods. We have recent studies looking specifically at this youth demographic using anonymous surveys.
And the user experience side is a really powerful data point here. Most of the respondents reported finding the subliminal messages helpful, that they had a positive impact on their mindsets.
And that is the critical contrast we need to unpack. While users believe they are effective, and that belief is itself incredibly powerful, the conclusive scientific evidence for direct, measurable behavioral change,
Induced by the subliminal itself.
it remains deeply skeptical.
Can you give us a concrete example of that scientific skepticism?
Look at the Schwartz et al. Study. It rigorously tested the effects of subliminal messages designed to boost self-esteem.
Okay.
They found that participants using the subliminal stimuli did report an improvement in self-esteem. However, they could not conclude the impacts were a direct result of the subliminal content.
Why not? What was the confounding factor?
The control group. The participants who didn't receive the supposedly active subliminal stimulant but were told they were receiving an intervention.
Let me guess, they also improved.
They also noticed an equivalent improvement in their self-esteem. This points to an overwhelming placebo effect being at play.
So the true mechanism of change isn't some hidden audio hack. It's the belief that you've initiated a powerful hidden self-improvement hack.
Your mind is changing itself, but it's using the technology as a Trojan horse.
Yeah, it's a massive insight.
Yeah.
But even if the effectiveness is debated, the methods are getting more and more diverse. The industry is constantly innovating ways to bypass our conscious guardrails.
Oh, absolutely. The source material outlines at least 5 technical ways these messages are embedded in music or audio streams.
Okay, give us the technical breakdown. What are they trying to do to our ears?
So first, the simplest method. Just placing target words or phrases below the recognized auditory threshold so they're masked entirely by louder music.
Simple enough.
Second and third, using words with an inverted time structure. These are known as backward masked messages. They're either placed above or below the perceptual threshold.
So you just hear gibberish, but the idea is that your mind is processing the inverted words somehow.
That's the claim. Then we get to the high-tech stuff.
Okay.
The fourth, and maybe the most concerning method given our discussion of the ultrasonic scape, is silent subliminals.
What are those?
These are high-pass filtered words. They contain acoustic energy that exists primarily in frequencies above 15 kilohertz.
So at the very high end of, or just beyond, human hearing.
Right. The claim is that the brain processes the frequency patterns even if the sounds are too high-pitched for you to consciously recognize.
That feels like a direct evolution from the infrasound we just discussed. It's using the non-conscious acoustic environment for influence.
Precisely. And the fifth method is just time-shrunk messages, where speech is played back at double speed, making it unintelligible.
Fast enough to bypass your attempt to focus on the content.
Exactly. The techniques are sophisticated, even if the result often relies on placebo. But when we look at commercial reality today, the most potent forms of unconscious influence are often subtle, perfectly audible, or visual cues, the stuff we call subtle nudging.
Modern marketing has perfected this. They don't need to hide a message at 17 kilohertz when they can just use the environment to guide your decisions.
Take the example of background music in a store. Studies have demonstrably shown that playing French background music in a liquor store dramatically increases the purchase rate of French wine.
And if they play German music,
It boosts German wine sales.
and the shopper is often completely unaware of the auditory cue's influence, they just think, I just felt like a Pinot Noir today.
Exactly. And physically, in retail, we see the power of the eye-level advantage. We are naturally drawn to what requires the least cognitive effort.
So products on the most accessible shelf, or options closer to a target item.
Accessibility becomes the default choice. It bypasses any deeper, conscious deliberation.
This is passive control in the physical world. Now let's translate that into the digital space where it becomes so much more pervasive, algorithmic anxiety and digital fatigue.
Persuasive design is endemic, especially in specialized areas like edtech learning platforms, where nudging mechanisms like badges, digital streaks, personalized reward pathways, they're all used to increase engagement and motivation.
Right, trying to make learning feel like a video game. But the source material highlights a significant and really dangerous trade-off for Gen Z students who've grown up with this. It's called the competitive partial mediation paradox.
That's a dense phrase, but the meaning is simple and dark. The platform design does boost short-term motivation. That's the direct benefit.
But the paradox.
The competitive partial mediation reveals that this boost comes at a cost. It also significantly increases cognitive overload, and it lowers the user's perceived autonomy.
Wait, why does it lower their autonomy?
Because the platform is using psychological triggers to compel you, not inspire you. You're responding to the external reward, not your own internal desire for knowledge.
So the short-term hit the badge. The streak comes at a measurable long-term cost to your feeling that you made the choice freely. The platform gives you a reward, but it takes away your agency.
This whole pattern of using overstimulation as a control mechanism is so vividly illustrated in the chaos of social media.
Especially with the hyper-edited influencer format hacks, like the dual-screen video trend.
Oh yeah, someone talking on the top and then a clip of someone cutting wood or playing a video game on the bottom.
Why are those so effective?
For one reason, they cause overstimulation and heightened vigilance in young viewers. It's too much information to process coherently. The chaotic energy and sensory overload, counterintuitively, compel the viewer to maintain extended attention.
It's basically hacking the brain's alertness system.
Those unexpected changes in motion, the sound, the rapid visual cuts, they function as dopaminergic pings. They trigger a continuous loop of arousal and anticipation.
So you're not engaged because the content is good or relaxing. You're glued because your nervous system is in the state of high alert, anticipating the next quick hit of novelty.
You are sustaining exposure to persuasive messaging not through interest, but through manufactured anxiety.
And this realization about technology-enabled mind control isn't just confined to academic papers anymore.
No, it has reached the highest levels of global regulation. The severity of the perceived threat is reflected right there in the European Union's proposed AI Act.
Which is landmark legislation.
The EU is proposing a ban on AI systems that use subliminal techniques beyond a person's consciousness to materially distort their behavior in a way that causes physical or psychological harm.
The fact that major governing bodies are treating this as a severe, bannable threat highlights that this invisible architecture of control is very real. It is no longer science fiction.
Okay, so if part 2 was about subtle commercial and digital nudging, part 3 takes the intent and dials it up to malicious, weaponized control.
We're moving from hidden nudges to overt, deployed frequencies designed to control, to disperse, and ultimately to break down the human psyche.
This is where the physics of sound meets geopolitical control. We need to start with acoustic weapons designed specifically for crowd dispersal. The sound cannons.
These are devices capable of delivering dangerously loud, highly focused sound over immense distances. The most famous example is the Long-Range Acoustic Device, or LRD.
This technology was developed and first utilized by the U.S. military in Iraq back in 2004 for crowd control, and it's since been adopted globally by civilian police forces.
We have to be clear, this is not a loudspeaker.
Not at all. The LRE to project a narrow, highly directional beam of sound up to 8,900 meters at 145 decibels.
And for context, permanent hearing damage begins at around 120 dB.
So 145 dB is designed to cause immediate physical pain, splitting headaches, vertigo, and intense nausea in anyone targeted within that beam.
It is acoustic territorialization writ large. It's using weaponized sound to define public space and cause indiscriminate harm or pain to anyone, protesters, bystanders, media caught in that focused wave.
It's a non-lethal weapon that still produces profound physical trauma.
And then we pivot to the more insidious targeted version, often used in retail zones to control loitering, the mosquito device.
This one is fascinating because it just leverages a known biological reality, the differential hearing capabilities based on age.
Right.
The mosquito emits extremely high-pitched frequencies, typically between 17 and 18 kilohertz. Now, due to a condition called presbycusis, which is just the natural decline in the ability to hear high frequencies as you age,
this sound is generally only audible to people under the age of 25, and it's often painfully so to teenagers.
So if you're over 30, you walk through a park or outside a retail zone and hear absolutely nothing. You feel no distress.
But a 16-year-old loitering there is being aggressively targeted by a weaponized frequency that is physically painful, forcing them to disperse.
It's sonic redlining, defining public space based on age and hearing ability. It perfectly illustrates how easily our differential sensory capabilities can be weaponized in the built environment to control demographics.
Okay, moving from crowd dispersal to psychological warfare. The history of using sound to break down psychological integrity is exceptionally dark. Let's talk about using auditory overload to cause psychological breakdown, starting with the Waco siege in 1993.
During that 51-day standoff with the Branch Davidians in Texas, the FBI employed a strategy they literally termed psychoacoustic correction.
Psychoacoustic correction.
This involved flooding the compound with sound at incredibly high volumes, particularly at night when the inhabitants were most vulnerable.
And they didn't just play static or a single tone. They used a calculated, chaotic mix.
The soundtrack included continuous, repetitive, high-volume music, everything from Nancy Sinatra to Christian rock, but it was blended with deeply disturbing non-music sounds.
Like what?
Screeching seagulls, sirens, blaring telephone rings, and the sound of dental drills.
The goal wasn't communication. It was psychological boundary dissolution.
Exactly. The constant, overwhelming sonic pressure was used for the mobilization of bodies, to disrupt sleep cycles, to shatter their sense of safety and reality, and to prevent any coherent internal thought or conversation.
The sonic environment itself became a weapon aimed at their cognitive structure.
And the source material positions this as part of a sonic warfare continuum, which was later taken to its most violent, logical extreme in military detention centers like Guantanamo Bay.
In Guantanamo, the assimilation of music and high-intensity sound into a direct torture weapon what they euphemistically called torture light, is just a chilling example of state-sanctioned psychological violence.
The methods were brutal. High-intensity sound, sometimes reaching up to 160 dBs, was constantly channeled into small cells.
And what's absolutely critical here is the mechanism of reception. The sound isn't just received through the air hitting the eardrum.
It's received via bone conduction.
Explain bone conduction for the listener.
When sound waves are intense enough, they vibrate the physical structure of your head, your skull, your jawbone, and that transmits those vibrations directly to your cochlea, bypassing the eardrum entirely.
So when you're exposed to 160 dBs in a tiny cell,
Your body is rendered a transducer of vibration. The sound is no longer just in the room, it is physically in your body.
that collapsing of the division between the self and the architecture is the ultimate terror. It's the space itself weaponized against your structural integrity. The mind just loses its ability to define where the self ends and the external world begins.
And this progression leads us to the ultimate technological rupture in sonic warfare, the inversion of sound projection itself, using ultrasonic mind control, specifically hypersonic sound, or HSS.
This is truly the stuff they said was too real to tell. It's no longer about controlling the mass body. It's about acutely targeting and rupturing the individuated subject with a projected internal voice.
HSS technology is fundamentally different from a speaker. It uses ultrasonic carrier waves, well above the 20 kilohertz threshold, to beam highly directional sound. It's almost like a laser beam of frequency aimed right at a target's head.
And the sound only becomes audible at a very specific point.
Exactly. The sound only demodulates. It only becomes audible sound we can recognize when the ultrasonic beam hits its target, which might be the air near the target or, most invasively, the inside of their skull.
So it's a sound laser. A normal speaker throws sound everywhere, but HSS beams these ultrasonic waves, and the sound is only created when that beam hits its target.
And the crucial, terrifying shift is that the sound is no longer perceived as coming from an external source. It is deceitfully projected as an internally occurring presence.
It simulates a whispering internal voice, a secondary essence of the self.
Imagine hearing a command, a voice, or a piece of music. But everything in your rational mind tells you it must be internal because there is no detectable external source.
That is the ultimate hack of reason. The ability to beam voices into the mind without any external source just circumvents all rational practices of defining the self's relationship to the world.
Reason gets scrambled. The subject experiences a schizospatiality, a fractured reality, where the boundaries between their internal thoughts and external reality are intentionally dissolved and violently controlled by the waveform. It is a mechanism designed to undermine the core sense of sanity.
So we've covered the external intentional influence, this architecture of sonic control, from industrial pressure to weaponized acoustics. Now we need to explore what happens when our own minds, trained by this constant bombardment and digital hypervigilance, start generating those sensations internally.
This is the fascinating concept of the mind firing back.
And the most common, benign manifestation of this technological conditioning is phantom vibration syndrome, or PVS.
The familiar, almost daily experience of feeling your phone buzz in your pocket or hearing a ringtone when the phone hasn't actually alerted you.
We've all normalized PVS as this minor, slightly humorous quirk of modern life. But the sheer ubiquity of this illusion, this phantom limb for sound, it should make us question the fundamental state of our nervous system.
Our brains have been trained by technology in a 21st century Pavlovian reflex.
That's the core mechanism. Years of constant digital notifications, texts, emails, social media pings, have conditioned our brains to be in a perpetual state of hyper-alertness, constantly anticipating the next demand for attention.
And this conditioning is so strong that we start misinterpreting minor, normal somatic sensations. A muscle twitch, a fold in our clothing, even just the rub of denim against your leg
Is misinterpreted as a phone alert. It's the neural alarm going off even when there is no incoming signal. And the connection between PVS and generalized stress or anxiety is absolutely undeniable.
We have concrete data on this. A study focusing on medical interns, one of the most high-stress professional environments you can imagine, showed the prevalence of PVS was directly tied to workload and anxiety.
What were the numbers?
The baseline prevalence was 78.1% before the internship started, but it skyrocketed to over 95% during the high-stress peak months of the internship.
And phantom ringing, actually hearing a phone ring that wasn't ringing, showed an even more dramatic jump. It rose from about 27% prevalence to nearly 85%.
The more stressed and hypervigilant you are, the more your nervous system is convinced the signal is coming, even when it isn't.
This hypervigilance brings us to the conceptual flip side of the placebo effect, the powerful nocebo effect.
If a positive expectation can induce positive results, what happens when we are constantly primed through media and fear to expect negative ones?
The nocebo effect is a clinical reality. The expectation of negative health effects is enough, psychologically, to cause those symptoms to manifest. Your psychological expectation leads directly to the symptomatic experience of illness.
It is the self-fulfilling prophecy of sickness.
And the classic modern case study for this involves the complex controversy surrounding wind farms and the infrasound they generate.
Right. Residents living near wind turbines reported a whole constellation of non-specific symptoms: persistent headaches, dizziness, nausea, severe sleep problems.
And they universally attributed them to the low-frequency sound emissions from the massive turbine blades.
However, double-blind provocation studies introduced a critical variable: expectation and priming.
So what did they do?
Participants were intentionally shown negative media DVDs or news clips that outlined the alleged health dangers of wind turbine infrasound before the experiment began. They were primed to be scared.
And then what happened when they were exposed to the sound?
The reported symptoms like headache and dizziness were significantly amplified during both genuine and sham exposure to infrasound.
Wait, sham exposure. So they were reporting symptoms even when the sound was demonstrably turned off.
Yes, simply because they had been primed to expect those symptoms. The symptoms were rooted primarily in anxiety and negative expectation, a response to the warnings and media, not necessarily the sound itself.
It's the fear of the invisible pressure, amplified by media, that caused the physiological response.
These negative expectations, fueled by health-related worries, cause people to focus intense attention on their own bodily processes. They misinterpret normal somatic sensations, a slight pressure change, a slight headache, as definitive signs of the specific illness they were warned about.
And it's important to note, this is not a new pattern. Our source material provides a striking historical parallel.
All the way back in 1889, following the rapid increase in telephone use, people began reporting telephone tinnitus.
Telephone tinnitus.
They were suffering from nervousness, buzzing noises, and nonspecific malaise that they attributed to this new, scary technology. New technologies consistently associate with the development of subjective illness complaints rooted in anxiety about change and exposure.
Okay, so we've covered low frequencies, the infrasound and the human range, the subliminals and audible weapons. Let's go back up to the high-frequency side, the hidden pollution of the ultrasoundscape.
High-frequency ultrasound, anything above 20 kilohertz, is absolutely pervasive in the modern city. It emanates silently from mundane and ubiquitous urban technologies.
Like what?
Data center cooling units, automatic door sensors, traffic flow monitoring systems, industrial ventilation. We simply don't hear it.
And that's the core issue, right? We design our regulations solely around the 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz range because that is the anthropocentric, human-centric threshold.
Yeah.
You just ignore everything else.
Which creates serious ecological and environmental health concerns. The source material highlights that our current regulations overlook the significant impact of this hidden ultrasoundscape on two specific groups.
Who are they?
Young children who can often hear higher frequencies than adults, and non-human species. Many insects, birds, and animals have sensory thresholds far, far above 20 kilohertz.
So if we're pumping out all this silent noise pollution that we can't hear, we could be undermining urban greening, sustainability efforts, and wildlife health because we're shattering the acoustic reality of entire ecosystems.
We are, without even measuring it. Humans have essentially resourcified the ultrasonic spectrum through electrification and technology. We've expanded our communication and sensing bandwidth at the potential expense of other species' sonic horizons.
The acoustic environment is just fundamentally different than it was a century ago.
It's saturated by sound that is invisible to us. And research has even mapped this. They found certain urban locations, like those near hospitals or major traffic intersections, produce the highest levels and the most dissimilar ultrasound compared to rural areas.
We are saturating our cities with silent sound that we haven't even begun to fully map the behavioral and ecological consequences of.
Okay, let's bring this deep dive back to the single massive takeaway.
Frequencies, whether they're too low to hear, too high to notice, or embedded right at the edge of your awareness, are not passive background noise.
They are active, deployed agents of manipulation, both commercial and political.
The unseen architecture of control relies on this sophisticated ecosystem. The things we can't hear, infrasound, ultrasonics, and the things we are trained not to notice. Subliminals, digital nudges, platform algorithms.
It all influences our emotions, our purchase decisions, and our very sense of spatial reality and autonomy.
We start by challenging the myth of the sovereign individual. We end by reflecting on the terrifying concept of the antenna body.
A subject constantly receiving, processing, and transmitting information and pressure from the outside world.
And as the research into acoustic warfare confirms, sound is no longer about having an inside or an outside. It is, to use the academic phrasing, both surface and depth at once.
The use of high-intensity bone conduction and HSS technology collapses the traditional boundaries of the self.
So, if our spatial reality, our sense of safety, and even our most private thoughts are being continuously orchestrated, influenced, or potentially ruptured by waveformed pressure, where does our true sense of self actually reside?
The ultimate story, too real to tell, is that the core of your rational self, your inner voice, is no longer a secure, private fortress. It's a target for external transmission.
The waveformed politics of the body are already defining target profiles and deploying silent methods to territorialize both public space and the cranial space of the individual.
Your mission now is simple. Critically listen to your environment, but more importantly, critically listen to your impulses.
Question the urge that makes you anxious or makes you compulsively reach for your phone. You might find that what you feel is not a weakness of the self, but an active, conditioned, or orchestrated response to the invisible signals pulsing all around you.
Be aware of the waveformed pressure.
Because if you don't listen, someone else is listening for you, and they might just be beaming the signal into your skull.